Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar. It's advice from alumni today for scholarship hacks. My name is Colton Oliphant, and I work on the campus partnerships team with World Strides. And I'm joined by three of our alumni. We've got Sarah, Namal, and Lucia. And I'll actually let each of you really briefly introduce yourself in like 30 seconds, say what school you're studying at, what you study, and where you went abroad, please. And we'll start off with Sarah.
Hey, yeah, sounds good. Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Betts. I'm a senior at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. And this fall, so fall of 2021, I studied abroad in Madrid, Spain with ISA.
Perfect. And why don't you go ahead, Namal?
Hi, everyone. I'm Yamal. I am a senior at Iowa State University, and I studied in Seoul, South Korea this past fall.
Excellent. And then we'll finish it up with Lucia.
Hi, guys. I'm Lucia Sanchez. I go to school at the University of Kentucky, and I'm studying marketing and fashion merchandising, and I went to Milan, Italy in the last fall.
Awesome. All right. Thank you to the three of you for joining us very much. Please note that we've got Sarah Warren in the chat who will be answering questions and dropping links periodically, so pay attention to the chat. One other note is that if you would like to see transcription, you can go down to the very bottom of your Zoom, click on live transcript and go up to show subtitle, and that will show you a transcription of everything that we're saying in case reading's a little bit easier for you. So first, I'm going to go through and give you a little bit of an overview on scholarships and funding your program in general. And then we're going to jump and dig right into the Ask Me Anything sort of question and answer section. So first of all, we want to let you know that there's only about 10% of students that actually apply for scholarships, which is surprising because there's quite a few options out there to earn some money and to take some of the financial burden off of your study abroad experience. And especially when you compare that to more than 50% of students using their normal financial aid to apply for their program. And so it looks like we've got someone that's we're gonna go ahead and mute everyone really quickly here. All right, good deal. So ISA and Teen award more than $1 million every single year in scholarships and grants. Some of that is directly through your home universities, and then others are through our central scholarship funds. And so you're going to want to make sure you take the time to check in and see what your different options are. You don't want to take it for granted. And many host universities do also offer scholarships. And so the university that you're actually going to will sometimes offer scholarships as well. And so you just want to make sure you ask that question. So we'll go ahead and go to the next slide, please. All right, so if you're an out-of-state student, especially, there is a good chance that going abroad might be cheaper than your home institution. It's at least a good enough chance that it is worth your effort to check into it. Also, if you already use financial aid, with very few exceptions, you're able to bring your financial aid along with you for your study abroad experience. And so you want to talk to your financial aid office, you want to talk to your study abroad or education abroad office, but federal financial aid at least is supposed to go with you. And then some of your internal scholarships or grants for your actual university, sometimes those can go too. The only way you can find out is to have the conversation. So if you have looked at your budget, you might want to look at the different ways that you can get funding. This presentation is all about scholarships, but make sure you consider the other sorts of ways that you can gain some money. And so consider, if you don't already, getting a job before you go abroad and just working as much as you can get away with and saving. And that getting a job, it could be a formal job, a W-2 sort of job, or it could be just hustling. You could go on Fiverr and offer a skill that you have. Way back in the day when I did a study abroad, I hung Christmas lights at strangers' houses that I found on Craigslist. and use that money to have some like meal money and to buy a camera before I left, before everyone's cell phone was the best camera you could ever hope for. And so dating myself a little bit there, but it's timeless advice. It's good advice to do everything that you can to try to pull together money. Ask your family for funds instead of gifts for any holidays that you're celebrating, any birthdays. Just be open to the different possibilities. And then make sure you start researching your scholarship opportunities early, because if you don't, then you will miss deadlines. And the second piece of that is mark those application deadlines on your calendar. Whatever you use for a calendar, everyone does their calendar system a little bit differently, but whatever you use, mark down those deadlines so that you don't end up missing an opportunity. Also, early in the process, identify professors and advisors who you feel like you've got a strong relationship with, who have a good idea of who you are as a student, and ask them for letters of recommendation. Even ask them in advance. They might be willing to write it before you have a scholarship you're specifically applying for, which could help them so that there's not quite such a long turnaround time by the time it's time to get that deadline in. Many essay prompts are very similar. Write one essay, tweak them so that you can apply to different scholarship applications. And if you don't like apply, you can't get the scholarships. Like that's the number one thing. You have to actually take the time and the effort to put the application in, and you'll likely be pretty pleasantly surprised at what you see. So go ahead and go to the next slide, please. Okay, so we're going to transition to the part that is what we all came here for. Heck, it's what I came here for, and that's actually having the conversation with the alumni. So I'm going to ask some questions. It will be somewhat open-ended in who responds. I'm not going to call on them. I'm just going to let the ones who have something to say, unless I specifically pull you out because I know that you have a really good answer for that in advance. And so to kind of slow roll it and start off in a way that is nice and smooth but relevant, I'm curious to learn what each of your motivations were for studying abroad. Like, why was it so important to you? What was your impetus? What like really drove you to make this happen?
I can go first if that's okay. I am a advertising and public relations major at UNL, but I'm also a Spanish minor. And so I studied abroad in Madrid, Spain to really work on my Spanish proficiency and really be surrounded by the language, because I feel like here in Nebraska, I'm not really surrounded by Spanish speaking individuals. So that was really a great experience to really immerse myself in the language and learn way more about the culture than I would in a typical textbook classroom setting. So that's why I studied abroad, but also I just wanted to honestly travel. I traveled to 13 different countries when I was abroad, so took every opportunity I could to travel. So yeah, that's my story.
I love it. All right, who wants to go next?
I can go next. So like I said, I'm studying both marketing and fashion merchandising. And shockingly, the middle of Kentucky isn't the most booming fashion industry. So when I saw there was a program in Milan, Italy, I knew that the experiences there were going to be ridiculous since it's one of the fashion capitals of the world. And just like Sarah, I really wanted to travel. I had never been outside of the country other than to Mexico, and it was a great opportunity, and with scholarships, it was cheaper than it would have been to stay here and study. So
I refuse to believe that Kentucky is not like a go-to spot for fashion, but I'll have to take your word for it, I guess.
You would have thought.
For me, I am a business and journalism major, and that like international perspective is very important in these like career paths, especially talking to people from different cultures. So I thought that going to a country very different from like my own South Sudanese heritage and also the American culture that I know would be very like helpful for me, like when I go to like the workforce. And I also wanted to travel. I haven't really been outside of the US or traveled internationally at all. I mean, I've been to Canada, but I don't really count Canada because Canada is Canada. But yeah, like I feel like it really gave me the opportunity to learn about a different culture, very different from my own, and also that opportunity to travel. And also my friends were going as well. So a good bonding experience, I guess.
Absolutely. And maybe we can dig in a little bit deeper there, Namal. I know that you went to Korea and you really wanted to learn more about Korean language, kind of tying into what you just said. Could you tell me a little bit more about specifically how you thought it would help in your future journalism career?
I mean, like for journalism, you literally talk to people from all different types of backgrounds. So I thought like if I wanted to do journalism like abroad or like go to like different countries to do reporting that experience in South Korea, since it is like a larger city, it has like a bunch of different transportation methods from Iowa, like a lot different from Iowa. So I feel like that would just be like a good experience and would help me like if I decide to pursue that in the future.
Again, shocked that an East Asian metropolitan area is different than Iowa, but again, we'll just have to take your word for it. So I'm curious if any of you are particularly excited to share some of the little tips and tricks about how you went about applying for a scholarship to try to increase your odds of actually getting those scholarships.
Well, one thing I keep telling everyone is just to apply to all scholarships that are available to you. You will be surprised about how many scholarships you're actually eligible for and how many you might receive. I spent a few days just applying to as many scholarships as I can through ISA, through my university, and one after another, I just kept getting in my inbox just another scholarship, and I ended up almost not being or not having to pay for the majority of my program because of how many scholarships I received, which is a really good deal. So yeah, like I said, just apply to all of them because you will be surprised on how many you receive.
A quick follow-up to that specific answer. How long did that take you? Did you like completely shut out the world and use a certain amount of time, or what was your strategy for actually doing that?
Yeah, so I don't really think the applications for the scholarships took as long as I thought that they would, because there were like a few essay questions, but a lot of them were like, why do you want to study abroad? How will it help you in your future career? Things that you know, it's not like a whole research essay for a class, things like that. So I probably just sat down one day and just dedicated an entire day to writing the essays. And then the next day I remember sending it out to like my parents and then my roommates, like, please, can you check this over, grammar, whatever. But yeah, it really didn't take that long. I would just say if you have a day or two to just focus your time on that, then that should be good. Also, the essays are not really that long either. Just just about yourself, what you know. So
that's great, and it definitely helps that you can recycle them for sure.
Yeah, yes.
That's a huge. How about either of you, Namal or Lucia?
I think my biggest advantage with scholarships was communicating with my financial advisors at my home university, because that's what I primarily pay for my schooling with. And luckily at UK, I was fortunate enough that all the scholarships transferred right over. So I looked through our education abroad program within my university, and both ISA have independent scholarships. So I applied for both of them and I got some from both sides of it. So that really is what played into the role of it being cheaper to go abroad. But yeah, I would just recommend looking everywhere, study abroad scholarships, just type it into Google and just spend a few hours just going through, marking some. And most of them have similar prompts. So it's not like it's like 5 or 6 essays you have to do. Sometimes you can rework them to match the specific prompt. So I would just really allocate your time and communicate with your advisors.
Perfect. How about you, Namal?
I definitely agree with what they said about like applying to all the scholarships you can. I feel like that was really helpful for me, and also just talking to people who've gone like in the past, seeing like what they've done, and also talking to different advisors. I had like a couple advisors look through my like scholarship essays to see if there's any ways to improve them, and I feel like that's what really helped me a lot.
That is a really smart strategy for helping to make sure that you compare well with the other students that you're quite frankly competing against. As soon as you can get it in front of the eyes of someone who has undoubtedly read hundreds or thousands of them, they're going to know what stands out and what doesn't. I remember actually as a scholarship advisor myself, telling students that you can't be boring. You have to stand out, because if this is some advice that maybe might help from the other side, when you're reading through 100 different applications and you're tired and cranky and kind of hungry, because scholarship reviewers are humans too, you start like grading on a curve negatively. Like everyone starts being like annoying to you, like, oh cool, I read this essay for the last 5 essays, show me something different. And is that fair? No, that's totally not fair at all, but it's also human, and you've got to take that into account. And so that's why even with some scholarships where the grammar and things aren't technically allowed to count, like the Gilman grant is a great example of one where it's not allowed to like use the grammar that's being used as the basis for whether or not the scholarship is awarded. It still will make a difference, because one thing that good grammar does is helps to convey your message clearly. And so if you have poor grammar to the point where you're not even getting your message across, then you're not going to be ranked as high in that sort of a scholarship, just because of like implicit unintentional bias. And so keep that in mind, like get as many eyes on it as much as possible, so that you can give yourself the best chance that you can to get some of those bigger scholarships. And actually, Namal, I know you did get the Gilman. And so do you want to talk a little bit about that process? Because that's kind of an extensive one, but it's for a significant chunk of change.
Yeah, I mean, I did the Gilman like the first time that I tried to study abroad, and my program got canceled. So it got deferred to this one. So it was a while back when I did actually go through the process. But for that, I remember just going back to my advisor like multiple times, and I mostly talked about my financial situation and how getting the aid would help my future career goals. So I feel like that's what I did for mostly with that.
Totally. And so what did you do for your follow-on project for the Gilman?
I haven't completed mine yet. I was originally going to do like, because I did write for my school newspaper. So I was going to write like a story about my study abroad experience and how to study abroad, and feature Gilman through that article. But then instead I changed it to do like a short film type of thing. And that's what I'm working on right now.
I look forward to seeing that film. No pressure, but a little bit of pressure. So I want to go a little bit more into what you actually did. And this is, again, for everybody to go through the, like, break it down really, really deep, really granular. We talked about overview, how you wrote the essays, but get into like way into the details of how you actually sat down and wrote the specific essays. Did you take old essays? Did you start with a really rough outline and then fill out the outline? Did you just write and write and write and then revise a bunch of times? How did you go about the actual process of writing those scholarship essays? And this is for anybody.
I'll start. So I mean, like you were saying, the most important thing in scholarship essays is to stand out. And so I remembered when applying freshman year to colleges, or I guess my senior year, when I applied, I really took time to think of what really made me unique. And so for my essays to get admitted to UK for scholarships, I talked about how I had gone to Mexico to visit my aunt and uncle's orphanage, and I taught dance there, and like the experience that was being immersed in a different culture and being able to interact with people who I didn't speak very much of the same language as them. And so I really focused that aspect into my essay for scholarships, relating that to why I want to go abroad again, to continue to expand that. And I really just took the prompt and put it in the same Google Doc with the prompt right there and then my essay. And I was like underlining each direct question of the prompt, because in high school, my teachers were like, do not get points off for not answering the question, answer every single chunk. So then I just went through and reworked it. I got it proofread, and I submitted it, and it ended up working out. So it's nice to know that you don't have to start from complete scratch for your scholarship essays. So see what unique qualities you have that you already know and have written about, and then just tailor it to the essay.
That's awesome. And one little tip about the things that make you unique, that's usually something that's kind of hard for people to notice, or even if they notice it, to articulate. And the thing that makes you unique is that, this is going to sound super like touchy-feely and ridiculous, but it's because you're you, and there is one you. And so all of the stuff that just feels like normal life to you, like everybody has, they don't, because they're not you. And so don't think that your specific circumstances are somehow not unique, because that's actually specifically what is unique. The trap that you can fall into is writing about what seems unique to you, which is applying for this scholarship, which from the standpoint of the reviewer is the least unique part about you, because in order to be in front of the reviewer's face, you are applying for the scholarship. But talking about where you grew up and your circumstances, this is a really good time for highlighting anything that's made your life challenging, and to talk about it with the degree of honesty that you're comfortable with. Like, this is one place where you can take some lemons and turn it into lemonade, because just by telling a good story, you can get money, and that's cool. So any other specific advice from you, Namal, or from Sarah, on how you actually sat down and turned that blank sheet into a scholarship application?
Well, one thing, one little tidbit of advice that I have is, so we talked about like making yourself stand out like from other applicants. I would say one thing that really helped me was when I was writing my essays, a lot of the essay prompts were just, why do you want to study abroad? And so taking that, but then putting a spin on it on how you'll use the skills that you learn from studying abroad in like your future life and your future career. I think that's super helpful. And I think the essay reviewers, that's what I was looking for, they like to see how your experiences studying abroad will help you later on in life. Yes, it's fun to travel and it's fun to meet new people and all these new experiences, but how will those help you in your career later on? I think that was super helpful, and that's something that I include. Like I said earlier, I'm a Spanish minor, so I was talking about how to learn about the culture and really practice my Spanish on a daily basis, living with a host family, things like that. I think that's important. If you can think of any qualities like that that you might learn abroad that you can take on later in life, I think that's super helpful to include.
And that brings up a good point. Make it an honest to God story. Like, start from the beginning, go to the end. You're in the middle right now in college. Don't be in the middle unless you're doing one of the fun things where you start in the middle of the story and then you go back and then you go to the end. Like, tell the entire story, because people remember stories. People do not remember facts and figures. This is kind of a fascinating little thing. I've helped with Fulbright students quite a few times to orient them to the US culture. And we ran a workshop a ton of times. And so these are really, really smart students. They already won the really prestigious scholarship to get there. We showed facts and figures about a case. We told a story about a case, asked them questions about the facts and figures. Not a single one over the years that I did it remembered a single fact or figure. And these are the sorts of people that you would expect to remember facts and figures. And it's because people don't remember facts and figures. People remember stories. And so make it a story. All right, how about for you, Namal? How did you actually like put pen to paper and make it happen?
I mean, I agree with what was said. I don't know if I really have much like to add to this. But I do agree with the like, don't be afraid to be honest. Like, not many people are going to read like what you write besides like the people on the scholarship board. But like for me, I talked about like I literally pay for school all on my own. Like I don't receive any financial help, and like I heavily rely on scholarships. And I also talked about my cultural background, a little bit of what I said earlier, how it helped me like in my future careers. Similar to what was said already, but yeah, don't be afraid to be honest. Not many people will see it, and it it pays off to be what
That's
you write.
great advice. That's such good advice. How about your actual writing process? Like, did you start with an outline? Did you start with an old scholarship essay, especially since you had a bunch from beginning the process in high school? Did you do something else?
For me, I recycled like a bunch of the old ones that I had and just tweaked them to fit the different applications. But for my school, like we have like the scholarship portal where you just fill out like general questions for the respective colleges that you're in. And since I'm in like the College of Business and the College of Liberal Arts, I filled out like those like quick ones and they match you to different scholarships. But outside of that, I applied to like another one that you had to find on the site, and also the Gilman, like, so I just used my ship essays for that.
Perfect. You turned in to a robot for a little bit, but that's all right. We got the main point of what you were saying. It was good content, so we're all good. So that's a little bit on the how. Let's go a little bit more into a bit of a laundry list, especially since this is being recorded. Students can go back and ask of where, like which specific scholarships did you go out, seek out? Which ones did you apply for? Which ones did you get? And which ones did you not get? That's something that is really difficult to talk about sometimes, is the things that we failed at. But for people who have never done it, it's really helpful to know, like, I applied for 10, I ended up getting 3, and those 3 were worth whatever amount of money, instead of assuming that you just applied for the 3 that you got. And so if you're willing to pull the curtain back a little bit on that one, I think that our audience would really appreciate that. And so again, free for all, whoever wants to speak.
I can go first. So the scholarships that I applied for were super easy. I just applied to the ISA scholarships, which was kind of a very simple application. And so was the UNL Education Abroad scholarships. So for the UNL Education Abroad, I'm assuming this is probably similar to different universities across the country as well, that you'll kind of just apply to one scholarship and they'll kind of place you where they see fit. So I applied to all of the scholarships available for UNL. And with that one application, I had to write 2 different essays. With that one application, I received 3 scholarships. 2 of them were from the UNL Education Abroad office, and then 1 of them was from the UNL Department of Modern Languages, since I am a Spanish minor. And I was also able to use some of my scholarships from UNL that were able to transfer to Education Abroad as well. So yes, I spent probably the majority of my time with UNL Education Abroad, just because my advisor was super helpful with getting me, connected to the resources I needed to fill out the application successfully. And it ended up working out in my favor, because I did receive a lot of scholarships that really brought down the price of my abroad program a lot.
It sounds like a unified application is probably a best practice, because that's what you got from both the school and from us.
Yes.
And ended up being considered for a bunch of different scholarships as a result. So that's awesome. That's great to hear. How about for the other 2 of you?
So for mine, I applied for, like Sarah, all the ISA scholarships, and I ended up getting the Castaneda scholarship, and that just involved like doing a blog post. I think I only had to do like 2 or 3 blog posts, and while I was like, oh, am I gonna want to write a blog while I'm traveling and studying abroad? But I'm really glad I did that, because 1, I get to help others, and 2, it's fun to look back on that time, and like I was writing it from that viewpoint. And so it's like good to reflect on, and you're getting paid for it. So there's nothing to complain about there. And then at my home university, we have like a education abroad office on its own. And I, just like Sarah, did 1 essay to apply for, I think there were only 2 or 3 options that I could have had. But I ended up getting 1 of those. I didn't get the other 2 because I don't know, there must have been, I think it might have been a different financial need base. And since I was getting so many scholarships already from my university, I think they were like, you're good. But there's a lot of good options out there. So yeah, just try and find the unified applications. Makes your work easy and makes the scholarships come in quicker.
Perfect. All right. How about you, Namal?
For me, I think I did apply to the teen one. I didn't get those ones, but I did get some from my school, like the matching thing that I talked about earlier. From those, I think I got like, I'm trying to see my like my scholarship letter here. I think I got 3 from there, and then I also got the Gilman scholarship. So yeah.
Awesome. All right, perfect. So one of the things that you said, Lucia, brought up something to my mind, that's actually my number 1 piece of advice for people who are not already avid travelers, or quite frankly, for people who are. Recording what you are experiencing as you're experiencing it is like having a time capsule, because then you just get to go back later and see all of the cool stuff that you did, and not from the standpoint of your memory, but from the standpoint of you as you're experiencing it. And it's a really cool feeling. It's advice that I give often. I take less often than I give it. But I could not recommend it highly enough because it just is a wealth of, like, that's obviously not specifically about scholarships, but it's a wealth of experience that you can't really truly capture in any other way. Like a photo doesn't do the same thing. And so writing about your experience is a great idea. And then you do have those notes if you want to turn it into a story later for a job application or a different scholarship for a different sort of something. And so it is also practical to have that sort of information recorded.
And I'm just going to chime in really quick. Also with that, I was moving really quick like all the time when I was studying abroad, so I didn't always have time to like write in a journal. But sometimes in the morning, like when I was getting ready for the day, I would just record myself for like 5 minutes, just be like, this is what I'm doing today. I feel like this. I can't believe I'm here. And so it's funny to look back and kind of look at that. And I know like years in the future, be like, kids, this is when I went abroad. And so that's an easy way to just get a quick little look into your life back then too, if you don't have a ton of time to sit down and really like thoughtfully write it out.
Totally. Okay, I've got two more questions. Both of them are for everybody. They're both kind of summative in nature. So one is hyper competitive and one is the exact opposite of that. So we'll start with the hyper competitive one. How do you have any specific tips for gaining an edge over all of the other scholarship applicants?
Maybe kind of like what I said earlier. Can you hear me? Okay. Like for me, I found someone on the scholarship board and had them like review my scholarship essays, and I feel like that's what helped me get an edge because I know like what they're kind of looking for. So yeah.
Which is very smart. Very, very smart. That's a good habit to just keep in general, by the way.
I would just say try to tie in as many like personal experiences as you can because like we kind of mentioned earlier, the scholarship reviewers are going through so many applications. And if you have like a personal story as to why studying abroad would be important to you and like your future career, something along those lines, I think that would be important. I did like a 1.5 week like service learning trip to Peru when I was in high school. And I kind of brought that up and how I lived with the host family during that week. And that really sparked my interest on learning more about the Spanish language and just the different Spanish speaking cultures, things like that. So definitely personal stories. And then how, like I said earlier, how studying abroad, education abroad will help you on or help you out later on in life.
I would say with like the aspect of storytelling, when I at first wrote the essay that I ended up crafting to fit the prompt, I would just start with like my story in mind and just write and try and think of it, everything I was experiencing, because personally when I read a story, I want to envision every sense that the writer is trying to convey. So I just wrote the entire thing and didn't even look at the word count, and then went through and was like, why did I put that in here? Try and like rearrange it and everything. And also like use your resources of who you know. Like I had my mom read through it just because she's a very well-spoken woman. And then one of my professors that I was close with, I sent it over to her. She's an English professor. And I was like, will you give me any tips to edit it? And I think that really makes a difference because it just polishes it and gives it like those last touches you might not look over. So just draft it and really take the time to write a good story.
Definitely. That's why writers have editors, right? Like that's not unique to college students. Like that's just people. If you get other eyes on it, then they're gonna see things that you might not see. One tip that I have that's along these lines is don't be afraid to go off book. Like just because there's no like published scholarship for your department that you're studying in, that doesn't mean that they don't have money. That just means that they haven't put it together into a formal scholarship program. Go to the department chair, ask if they'll give you money. Just be super direct about it. I want to go abroad. It's relevant for these reasons. Do you have any departmental funds that I could use for that? You will be shocked at how often the answer is yes, we have this pile of funds, and if we don't use it, it gets swept away by the university, and so I'd much rather give it to you. Don't be afraid to, I mean, it's scary to do that. Don't get me wrong. That's not an easy thing to do. It's super scary to do that sort of thing. But if you don't do it, you're guaranteed to not get money. And if you do it, then you could get some money from it. And so no reason not to. Okay, so here's the last one. This is kind of the final summative wrap-up question. What was that it moment when you were abroad? And so this is after scholarship, this is post-scholarship. What was that it moment after you were abroad that you'll never forget, that just really made the experience stand out and be like, man, this is like such a good choice for me to do this?
I can start, I guess. So for me, I like my goal before going abroad was kind of not only to really hone in on like my major and get passionate about my area of study, but also to kind of figure out like who I was as an individual removed from everything I'd ever known, because you're kind of forced to discover that whether you realize it or not. Um, so when I was abroad, it was Milan Fashion Week, which is the most outrageous thing ever. And so our professor was like, you need to get into the show. She was like, act the part, act confident, and you can work your way in. And here, I'm not like that. I'm not like, I'm going to just sneak my way in, but it's Milan. I had to do it. And so my friend and I, we like got ready, dressed the part, tried to look as posh as we could. And we ended up sneaking into a fashion show for Marco Rambaldi. And I work for my fashion magazine at my university. And so like a publicist approached me and was like, oh, do you guys need your seats? We just did not have seats at all. And I was like, oh, actually, I'm with KRNL Lifestyle and Fashion. We're from America. We flew in last night. I'm not sure if we're on the list. And so she's like looking at my name. It's just not on the list. She's like, oh, it's not on here. That's all right. You guys can just stand over here. I was like, thank you so much. So we got to just stand against the wall and watch the fashion show. And I was leaning over to my friend. I was like, I cannot believe this is happening. I'm watching a live fashion show in Milan. So that moment was like, wow, the opportunities that I got there, I never would have expected. And I think about it day to day.
That is incredible. I love that. And that, I mean, that is actually a good piece of advice too. A little bit of boldness will take you a long way sometimes. How about for either of you, Namal or Sarah?
So for me, also, I got a notification that my internet is unstable, so hopefully you can hear me. But so like I've said, I am a Spanish minor. So I lived with a host family, and it was like a single dad, and they had 3 kids. So one of like my best memories is just sitting at the dinner table every night with the host family and just improving my Spanish, because I feel like when I first got there, I was so timid and I was like, oh, my Spanish isn't that good. But just finally like being able to be confident, having a fluent conversation with them and just talking about different things. I've told this story before, but my little host brother, his name's Juanito, he's 14. He loves American pop culture. So we would just talk for hours on end about American pop culture and the Kardashians and which Kendall or which Jenner or Kardashian is better than the other. And I just thought that was, I just loved those memories because I was speaking a different language, and someone that I'm still super close. I'm still friends with them on Facebook. I still message them on WhatsApp. So I really like being able to continue to talk with them on a daily basis too, which is really important. But I would say that like my favorite moment from abroad was probably we went to Mallorca one of the first weekends, and we went cliff jumping, and I am very afraid of heights, and my friends literally saw me standing on top of the cliff and they're like, Sarah, you're shaking, like don't go. I was like, no, I'm already here, I have to go. So that was a really, really cool experience, and I'm glad I did it. I don't know if I would recommend that for everyone, but it was really fun, and I'm really glad that I did it.
Perfect. That's so good. All right, your turn, Namal. What do you got for us?
For me, I'm struggling to find like a specific like it moment. But I definitely do think that it was worth it. Just being able to like travel like affordably throughout the country was something that I've never been able to do before. Because in Iowa, like I said earlier, we don't have like that transportation system. And you have to drive everywhere. But here I was able to use the train, go to a bunch of different cities with my friends for really cheap, meet a bunch of people, and use like the little Korean that we know to like be able to travel. So I feel like that was what made it super fun and worth it for me.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you again to all 3 of you for joining us. It's really, really illuminating to hear your journeys and to hear what it really took for you to make this study abroad experience happen. and some of the tips for how you got some good scholarships out of it. It was just really good to hear from all of you. Just as a reminder for the audience, the scholarship deadline is coming up on April 30th for fall 22. And so if you are getting ready to go abroad with us, please do make sure that you follow some of this great advice that you just heard and get those applications in. Might as well get paid for doing something that is life-changing. Why not? All right, so thank you everyone and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.